I've been a wedding photographer for 12 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. Bridezillas, cheating grooms, family feuds that turned reception halls into war zones. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered when I was editing the Morrison wedding photos 3 weeks ago. It started as the perfect job. Rebecca Morrison was marrying David Chen in what was supposed to be the social event of the season. Rebecca came from old money, the kind of family that owned half the commercial real estate downtown. David was a successful tech entrepreneur, handsome and charming with that easy smile that made everyone like him instantly. The wedding was held at the Morrison family estate, a sprawling mansion that had been in the family for 4 generations. I'd photographed weddings there before, but never one this elaborate. 200 guests, a 7-piece orchestra, flowers that probably cost more than most people's cars. I remember thinking how perfect they looked together during the ceremony. Rebecca was radiant in her vintage lace gown, a family heirloom that had been worn by Morrison brides for over a century. David couldn't take his eyes off her, his face glowing with what looked like genuine love and adoration. The reception was flawless. Perfect speeches, perfect food, perfect dancing under the stars in the mansion's rose garden. I captured it all through my lens, the tender moments, the laughter, the tears of joy from both families. It was the kind of wedding that made me remember why I loved my job. But it was during the editing process that everything fell apart. I was going through the photos chronologically, touching up lighting and color balance, when I noticed something odd in one of the shots I'd taken during the cocktail hour. In the background of a photo of Rebecca's bridesmaids, I could see David through the French doors of the library. He was on his phone, and his expression was nothing like the happy groom I'd been photographing all day. He looked angry, almost desperate. At first, I dismissed it. Wedding days are stressful. Maybe it was just business, or cold feet, or any of a dozen normal explanations. But something about his body language bothered me. I zoomed in on the image, enhancing it as much as I could without losing quality. That's when I saw the tears streaming down his face. I went through the rest of the photos more carefully after that, looking for other moments I might have missed. What I found made my blood run cold. There were 5 other photos where I could see David in the background, always on his phone, always with that same desperate expression. In one shot, taken during the father-daughter dance, I could see him through a window, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. In another, captured while I was photographing the cake cutting, he was visible in the reflection of a mirror, his hands shaking as he held his phone to his ear. But the worst one was a photo I'd taken of Rebecca tossing her bouquet. In the corner of the frame, barely visible behind a marble pillar, David was talking to a man I didn't recognize. A man wearing an expensive dark suit who seemed to be doing most of the talking, while David nodded like his life depended on it.
The man's face was partially obscured by shadows, but there was something about him that made every instinct I had scream danger. Maybe it was the way he stood too close to David, invading his personal space. Maybe it was how David kept glancing around nervously as if making sure no one could see them. Or maybe it was the briefcase the man was carrying. Who brings a briefcase to a wedding? I spent hours staring at that photo, trying to piece together what I was seeing. The timestamp showed it was taken at 9:47 p.m., right in the middle of the reception when everyone should have been celebrating. Instead, David was having what looked like the most important conversation of his life with a stranger in the shadows.
That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I decided to enhance the image further, using professional software I rarely needed for wedding photography. I worked on it for hours, pulling detail from shadows, sharpening faces, trying to get a clearer picture of what was happening. When I finally got a good look at the mysterious man's face, I nearly fell off my chair. I recognized him from the news. Marcus Volkov, a suspected money launderer who'd been linked to several organized crime investigations. The FBI had been trying to build a case against him for years, but he was too smart, too careful. He'd never been charged with anything, but everyone knew what he was. And there he was at Rebecca Morrison's wedding, having an intense conversation with her new husband. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about David's expression in all those photos, the fear in his eyes, the the way his hands shook. This wasn't a business meeting or a casual conversation. This looked like a man being threatened, cornered, forced into something he didn't want to do. The next morning, I called Rebecca's office. As the head of her family's real estate empire, she was always busy. But she agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. I told her I had some special photos from the wedding that I wanted to show her personally. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, far from anywhere her family or David might see us. Rebecca looked tired, which surprised me. Most new brides had a glow that lasted for weeks after their wedding. Instead, she looked like someone carrying a heavy burden. "These are beautiful, Emma," she said, scrolling through the tablet where I'd loaded a selection of the best wedding photos. "You really captured the magic of the day." "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you know a man named Marcus Volkov?" Her face went white. The tablet slipped from her hands and clattered onto the table. For a moment, she just stared at me like I'd slapped her. "Why would you ask me that?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I showed her the enhanced photo of David talking to Volkov. "Because he was at your wedding and your husband looked terrified to be talking to him." Rebecca stared at the photo for a long time, her hands trembling. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into," she said. "You need to delete that photo. Delete all of them. Pretend this conversation never happened." "Rebecca, what's going on? Are you and David in some kind of trouble?" She looked around the cafe nervously, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. "David owes money to some very dangerous people. A lot of money. More than we could ever pay back." "How much money?" $3 million. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. $3 million? How is that possible? David had a gambling problem before we met. He got in deep with some underground poker games, borrowed money from the wrong people. He thought he could win it back, but he just kept losing more and more. By the time he tried to get out, the interest had compounded to an amount that would destroy both our families. And Volkov is connected to these people? Volkov is these people. He runs the whole operation. David's been trying to pay him back for 2 years, but every time he makes a payment, more interest gets added. It's like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. I thought about David's expression in those photos, the desperation and fear I'd captured without realizing it. What did Volkov want at your wedding? He wanted to make sure David understood the new terms of their arrangement. Rebecca's voice was hollow now, like she was talking about someone else's life. Since David can't pay the money back, Volkov wants something else instead. What? Access to my family's real estate portfolio. Inside information about upcoming deals, zoning changes, anything that could give him an advantage in his money laundering operations. He wants to use our legitimate business as a front for his criminal activities. The full scope of what was happening hit me like a freight train. Rebecca, you can't do this. You can't let him blackmail you into helping criminals. What choice do I have? If we don't cooperate, Volkov will kill David, and probably me too, to tie up loose ends. He made that very clear at the wedding. We have to go to the police, with these photos as evidence. Evidence of what? A conversation at a wedding? Volkov is too smart to say anything incriminating where it could be recorded, and even if we could prove he threatened us, what then? Do you think prison walls can stop someone like him? He has people everywhere, Emma. Cops, judges, federal agents. The corruption goes all the way up. I stared at the photo on my tablet, at David's terrified face and Volkov's cold smile. So what's the plan? You just help him launder money for the rest of your life? The plan was to cooperate for a while, let him use some of our smaller properties for his operations, and hope he eventually gets bored or finds bigger fish to fry. We thought we could manage it without anyone getting hurt. Thought? Past tense? Rebecca's composure finally cracked. She put her head in her hands and started sobbing quietly. David's dead, Emma. They found his body this morning. The world stopped. I felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the cafe. What? The police are calling it a suicide. They say he jumped from the roof of his office building, but David would never. He was scared, but he wasn't suicidal. He was trying to find another way out. You think Volkov killed him? I know he did. David must have tried to back out of their deal, or maybe he threatened to go to the authorities. Volkov doesn't tolerate betrayal. I thought about those wedding photos, about capturing what I now realized were David's last happy moments. In a few hours, he would be dead, and his new wife would be trapped in a nightmare that was only beginning. Rebecca, you have to run. Get out of town, change your identity, disappear before... Before what? Before Volkov decides he doesn't need me anymore either? He's already made it clear that David's death doesn't cancel the debt. If anything, it makes my cooperation even more valuable to him. I'm the only one left who can give him what he wants. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. Finally, Rebecca looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I need you to do something for me," she said. "I need you to keep those photos safe. Hide them somewhere Volkov can't find them. If something happens to me, if I end up like David, I want there to be evidence of what really happened." "Nothing's going to happen to you. We're going to figure this out." "No, Emma, we aren't going to do anything. You're going to go home, delete every photo from that wedding except the ones I asked you to hide, and you're going to forget this conversation ever happened for your own safety." But I couldn't forget. How could I forget that I'd photographed a murder victim at what turned out to be his last supper? How could I forget that Rebecca was trapped in a web of corruption and violence that would probably kill her too? I spent the next 3 days researching everything I could find about Marcus Volkov and his organization. What I discovered made me understand why Rebecca was so terrified. Volkov wasn't just a money launderer. He was the head of an operation that stretched across multiple states with connections to Russian organized crime. People who crossed him didn't just disappear, they were made examples of. But I also found something else. Agent Sarah Martinez of the FBI had been working the Volkov case for 4 years, and according to several news articles, she was close to a breakthrough. If I could get the photos to her, along with Rebecca's testimony, maybe there was still hope. The problem was convincing Rebecca to cooperate. When I called her, she sounded like a different person. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like someone who'd given up on life. "They've already approached me," she said. "Volkov's people came to the funeral. They want me to start providing them with information next week. Property assessments, development plans, anything that could help them identify good targets for their money laundering operations." "Rebecca, listen to me. I found an FBI agent who specializes in cases like this if we work with her." "Emma, stop. Just stop." Her voice was sharp now, cutting through my hopes like a blade. "Do you know what happened to the last person who tried to help the FBI build a case against Volkov? His name was Thomas Chen, David's brother. He was an accountant who stumbled across some financial irregularities in a client's books, irregularities that led back to Volkov's organization. He went to the authorities, agreed to cooperate, wore a wire to meetings. My blood ran cold. What happened to him? They found pieces of him in garbage bags scattered across 3 different counties. The FBI's protection program couldn't save him. Federal agents couldn't save him. What makes you think they can save me? I didn't have an answer for that. How do you fight someone who seems untouchable, who has enough power and influence to murder people in broad daylight and make it look like accidents or suicides? "So that's it? You're just going to help them?" "I'm going to survive. That's all I can do now. And Emma, if you're smart, you'll do the same. Forget about those photos. Forget about this conversation. Move on with your life." She hung up before I could respond. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the enhanced photos of David's last moments. In the harsh light of my computer screen, I could see every detail of his terror, every line of strain around his eyes. This man had been murdered, and his killer was going to get away with it. Worse, he was going to use that murder to force Rebecca into becoming an accomplice in his criminal empire. I thought about Thomas Chen, David's brother, and what had happened to him when he tried to do the right thing. I thought about all the other people who had probably tried to stop Volkov over the years and where they'd ended up. But I also thought about Rebecca, trapped and alone, waiting for the moment when Volkov decided she was no longer useful. That's when I made the decision that would either save her life or get us both killed. I copied the photos to an encrypted drive and wrote a detailed account of everything Rebecca had told me. Then I drove to the FBI field office downtown and asked to speak with Agent Sarah Martinez. What I didn't know was that Marcus Volkov had been watching me ever since that conversation in the cafe. He knew about the photos, knew about my meeting with Rebecca, and he was already 3 steps ahead of both of us. The trap was closing, and we had no idea how much danger we were really in. But sometimes when you're faced with evil that seems unstoppable, the only choice you have is to fight back, even if you know you'll probably lose. Because some things are worth dying for. Even if you're just a wedding photographer who took the wrong picture at the wrong time. Controls do chat Sonnet 4.